I do have a little bit of swag. If anyone wants a sticker at the end, I'll give one out for each question. I know Andy's going to want one, so I'll keep one just by for you, Andy. So yeah, I've been back at Just Eat again. I'm a contractor, and I've been recently contracted back to Just Eat since last summer, and I've helped them do a big migration project for one of their recent acquisitions. So I just wanted to run through some of the things I've learned and we've learnt during the last 6 months on the project. For those who don't know, this is wildebeest migrating across the Masai Mara. I saw similar things on my honeymoon, but unfortunately I couldn't dig out one of my old photos. I had to grab them offline. Okay, so on the menu today, I want to talk about why we need to do this migration and our approach to it and what we learned along the way. Quite a lot of interesting things we found, particularly around Google Play stage rollouts and some iOS phase rollout learnings as well. But basically we were taking an existing Menulog app and we were upgrading it to talk to a completely different platform and a totally different technology stack, and so share some of those learnings along the way. Okay, so why? So not very long ago, around about nearly 3 years now actually, Just Eat bought Australia's #1 takeaway platform. They also have a subsidiary in New Zealand, and they spent the not inconsiderate sum of 687 million Australian dollars on them. So it was then Just Eat's biggest acquisition. It still remains their biggest acquisition despite swallowing up Hungry House in the UK. And after 18 months of ticking along on Menulog's legacy platform, it was time to get them on board onto Just Eat's platform. And so there wasn't much pressure at all with 687 million's worth of acquisition. Just Eat is now it was a FTSE 250 company. It's now a FTSE 100 company, so it's under a lot of scrutiny. And they told the market back in March that, oh yeah, we're going to get Australia and New Zealand onto our platform by the end of the year. There hadn't actually been a great deal of work done at that point to work out whether it could be done in that time frame, but they thought they'd tell the markets that, so there's a little bit of pressure. So I got involved around about June last year. We had around about 1 million users across web, Android and iOS to migrate across the two countries, and yeah, so it was a pretty high pressure, lots of people getting chucked at the project, both external and internal, and yeah, it was a bit of pressure for everybody. So the goal was to roll out a new native experience using the Just Eat core platform to mirror that we have in other markets across the world. So we're Just Eat operate in Canada, Italy, Spain, UK, France, Switzerland, to mention a few, and they wanted to bring the capability of those markets to Australia and New Zealand, but also try and bring some of the features that are of the Menulog platform to the Just Eat platform. So things that could be potentially rolled out elsewhere. And of course, with any app rollout, you can't just flick a switch one day and say everyone's got to go download a new app, or everyone's got to upgrade their app in order to be able to continue using. You want to have a seamless experience. So we needed to make sure that we maintained backwards compatibility between the two platforms during the transition, which was fun, particularly when we were needing to ship an app before the new platform was actually even ready. We had to get an app out there to ensure that we had decent enough adoption on the cutover dates that the app could talk to both platforms without giving a bad experience to users. We also needed to bring the Menulog brand to the Just Eat platform. So in the sort of the 12 months prior to this project starting, we'd been rebranding each country one by one to match the Just Eat sort of new brand that's in the UK, and it's been here for about 18 months now. So we used a similar approach for the apps to be able to skin the apps in a sort of in a secondary way to our sort of core branding. So we had like a multi-dimension flavouring approach on the Android app and a similar kind of mechanism on iOS. So the idea was to make the minimal changes necessary to the core app, but tweak the styles and the colouring and the imagery that was used throughout the app elsewhere. And we wanted there was a big thing for the business that they couldn't afford to do a big bang, just like turn all the things on and see what happens. They wanted to mitigate that risk, so we needed to be able to onboard users gradually. and there also needed to be the option to roll back. So if we went live in a particular area or with a particular subset of users, we needed to be able to reverse that in case there were problems, say with like payments not being able to cope with load, or you know, in Australia they had PayPal integration, which we only have in one other country. So we weren't sure if that was going to be able to handle the load that we were expecting in Australia, because it's a very big market. So that option to roll back was necessary, and we also wanted to, as we say, minimise user disruption. So we didn't want to one day for users to open the app and go, oh shit, I've got to go and download a new app. I'm just going to go and use one of your competitors instead, like Eat Now, who are actually a subsidiary of Menulog, or Uber Eats or Deliveroo, who are big competitors in the Australian market. So we had to decide how was it best to do this migration from one completely separate code-based Menulog app on Android to a new Android app, and vice versa on iOS. One of the team involved thought, can't we just smash the two apps together into one single code base and ship it and just flick between the two using some sort of remote control?
Feature switch.
Yeah, something. It's just a feature switch, just to switch between one native experience and another native experience. Now, in order to be able to do that, you would have to have a very clean architecture and to be able to substitute one thing for another, like your analytics module for another analytics module. And although the Just Eat app is sort of converging towards that architecture, the Menulog app by no means was anything like that. In fact, the vast majority of the Menulog app experience was actually a web view wrapper. Only a couple of the screens were native. So there was going to be all sorts of analytics headaches that were potentially there. So you know, if you launch the app and then after you sort of fetch the remote config, decide what to do, where should your session be reported to? So it would have been a big headache, and it would have been forking hell, because we would have had to smash the Menulog app into the Just Eat code base and then rip it out later on. And while we were having to do all this branding work and so on that we wanted to keep, we didn't want to get down this forking route. So what we went with instead was what we were anticipating on doing, which was adding a new flavour to each for the country, or the two countries, so Australia and New Zealand, and then in that we would be adding the branding and the country configuration for that particular country, and we tried to minimise the amount of forking we would do for a kind of backwards compatibility mode. So basically we went with wrapping the old Menulog site completely within a web view, which was actually almost identical experience to what users were currently getting. A little bit slower, obviously, because you have the loading time, but there was a risk of a slightly poorer experience. But this was far less risky approach than trying to smash two apps into one, which would have been, looking at the code, you might be able to do it for one platform, but to say, oh yeah, from the offset you will definitely be able to do the iOS and do the Android platform. It wasn't feasible in the timeline that we were looking at. Plus, we also had other, as I said, features that we wanted to bring into the Just Eat platform. So we didn't want to risk the delivery of those on the basis of trying to do a complicated task. So the idea was that we would be able to flick between a sort of legacy web view of the Menulog, and then at a time when we were ready in a particular area, we would say, right, we're going to turn on the new experience for these users. Not quite as seamless as just that fancy animation there, which my daughter added this morning for me. She's only 7. But this was definitely the least risky approach, and it allowed us to focus on creating the best experience after people had obviously landed in the new experience. So we obviously needed to figure out a way of remotely controlling how people got delivered this, and we couldn't have it dependent on either the old platform or the new platform, because we didn't know quite when the old platform was going to go away, and we didn't know, and that certainly that would go away at some point, and apps stay in the wild for years. You know, we got apps that have been there for, people haven't upgraded them for 2 years, and they're still there. So you can't risk breaking those apps by ripping away the platform as they talk to. And we didn't really have the capacity to build remote control into either of the two platforms, and likewise we couldn't rely on either of them being there we didn't have a new Australia AWS platform stood up in the Sydney data centre for Amazon at the point where we were shipping these apps. So we had to basically go with a third-party approach. So we went with Firebase because it was one mature. It had been out for two years. Firebase Web Config had been out for by that point. And after testing, we saw that it was both, it appeared to be scalable and fast response times. It was all CDN'd around the world, so wherever people were, it seemed to be a decent experience for end user side. And it was a pretty low integration effort, so it was a case of adding one dependency, and the map code that was needed to manage this was very limited. So we went to Firebase Web Config. I think we've talked about it. I think we've touched upon it in previous Southwest Mobile talks, but I just want to give a quick overview of it. So the basic principle is that remote config works by combining parameter values according to conditions and default values which are set by you on the server side, and then your app requests that, and based on where that app is and what app version that is, or what locale it's in, you can get different results back in that config. Apps typically fetch the config at startup, and as with any network request, that can take several seconds or even 10 seconds, or it can time out. So you have to cater for that within the app, but you also have both default values which can be built into the app, and it can also use cache config as well. So it will fall back to cache config if that can time out. So basically you launch a fetch, or you fetch it at app launch, and at a later time you can either choose to activate that config immediately, or you can activate it on next launch of your app, because you don't want necessarily your home screen experience to change 5 seconds after it's loaded because you've just flicked on a feature toggle. So we went with the approach of fetching and activating immediately, because we knew that the frequency of users coming back to the app meant that we needed to make sure they had the right experience that time they were using it. We couldn't afford to wait until they next come back to the app to give them the right experience, because the old platform could be dead by then, or they might be going into the wrong experience. So it is important to think about what defaults you're setting, both in-app and on server side. And as you're going through a migration like this, if you're shipping new versions of your app, consider updating those defaults to match what you've currently got on the server side. Otherwise, you can end up people getting a stale config, and if they launch the app for the first time, they can see that that they can end up with a config which is the default one built into the app. Yeah, if they get sort of network connectivity issues. So once you've got Firebase integrated, you have this dashboard where you can go in and you can create remote variables called parameters. Each of those values can be booleans, strings, basic types, basically, and then you can qualify what value should be returned for different conditions. And each parameter can have a value per condition, or it can just have a default. So for example here, pilot areas has got 2 conditions which sets a string of comma separated states, or it has a default value of empty. But at the bottom one we've got 3 different configurations with 3 different values there. One thing to bear in mind though, once you've got this console up and you're live with your app, as soon as you hit publish changes at the top, that will affect any user of your app who is launching it at that point. And there's no change control really over Firebase, so you've got the potential to break things easily, and there's no history, so you can't see like who's gone in and changed something. So you want to be very careful about who you have access, or who has admin rights on a console like this. There's potential for cock-ups. I think we had one for maybe 10 minutes after we shipped an app, it was in the wrong config, but fortunately Google Play takes a little while to actually start shipping things before that can be the case. So you can define conditions based on OS versions, locale, country, app versions. You can also do random percentiles and user audiences. We didn't use them ourselves. And you can also use, if you've got the latest dependency of Firebase, you can do A/B testing with it as well. So you can use it for A/B testing of features. although we haven't used that yet. It's important. The bit at the bottom there, the order of conditions determines the evaluation order. That's quite important. So if you want your debug config to override your production config, you need to make sure it's at the top of the list because it will be evaluated in order from the top to bottom. So when you can combine these various configs, you can actually end up with you can end up one with a very long list of conditions, particularly as all your conditions are shared across all the apps you've got on a single project. But you can do clever things like, say for example, if you shipped an app to Australia and that live version of the app you want to just test, okay, what happens when we turn all the things on? You can qualify your conditions so that it only gets served to people in the UK or with a particular app version or in a particular locale. So, for example, when I was out in Sydney and we wanted to do some testing, we said, okay, well let's say that this only be delivered to devices that's set to Spanish, because we knew that the number of people in Australia with Spanish was like 0.01%, and we flicked it on for an hour and we did some testing and it worked fine. So you've got the power to do that, and it's very easy to set that config and publish it, and it's really quick. So you're not relying on anyone else in your platform team to deploy a new configuration or to tweak a feature flag for you. You can do it through the console. You click go, click publish, sorry, and then next time you launch the app, as long as it isn't within its cache period, it will fetch that config and it will apply immediately. So once we integrated Firebase, we went with, as you can probably guess from the states you saw there, we went with a sort of a state-based geographical rollout approach. Australia is a huge place, and it lends itself towards a geographical rollout because most people live in cities, and most cities are quite a long way from borders. So basically what we did was on the Android app at least, we tried to geolocate their state from their last known location, so using Google Play Services last location known, and then geolocated that using the Android framework. And typically we could get that back within a second, 2 seconds, which is pretty fast, and we didn't need to know what their latest location was. We didn't need to know it to a high degree of accuracy, because states in Australia are massive. Like, you can fit about 10 United Kingdoms into Western Australia. So so what we did was we tried to geocode them. If we couldn't geocode them, we would ask them for their location with a bit of a onboarding. We're upgrading menu log, please let us know your state. And then on subsequent launches we would use that save state, or we would try to geolocate them again. So if they were moving around from, say, Melbourne to Sydney, we would give them the appropriate experience depending on whether we had rolled out the new platform in their state or not. And because we were able to geolocate a lot of users because they were previously given permission to allow access to location permission, only less than 50% of users saw this screen, and most of the time it was a completely seamless experience. They either got the old app experience in a web view or the new Just Eat experience. We couldn't do the same on iOS because apparently iOS doesn't let you get the last known location as quickly. So basically we didn't need to fire up LBS and say, okay, grab me a location. We just use the last known location. iOS has, I guess for privacy reasons, says each app needs to explicitly get its own location. It can't use the shared location that have been requested from other apps. But on Android, because people tend to use location-based services all the time, we would get a location pretty fresh and pretty quickly. And when we looked through where people were actually checking out, we saw there was a high degree of correlation between where they said they were, where we inferred they were, and where they ended up checking out. So according to Google Analytics at least. So when you're doing a migration like this, you probably want to think about what's going to happen to existing users of the app. So not everyone updates their apps, and when they come to find that either they've got a really old version of the app and it starts breaking, they might go to the Play Store and see, okay, I've got to update my app, but then they might see that there's, like, if they're on Android 5 or older, they might see they've got to grant permissions. So think about in your what's new, think about if you are adding permissions, make sure you put some justification around that. I think that's good practice anyway for anyone installing an app on old versions of Android. But you also need to think about users that have got, say, a slightly older version of your app, which isn't capable of talking to your new platform. think about building in an upgrade prompt to be able to say, okay, remotely turn this on. It's a feature that Just Eat has had in their current apps for some time, but the old Menulog app didn't have it, so we just whacked it into Firebase and did a similar thing where we could just set this flag and just notify users they need to upgrade. And when they arrived at the Play Store, it told them what the reasoning behind it was, and if they needed to add any permissions, then that was the case. So then, when we came to actually shipping this thing, there was this is a bit of a tangent really, but we learned quite a lot about Google Play staged rollouts and Apple's new phase releases, which got announced at WWDC last summer. There's a few shiny things both on Android and the Apple platform that are good to know, and some interesting gotchas that we found. So I'll start off with Google Play stage rollout. So they've offered this for some time, Google, so you don't have to whack a app out to 100%. You can now select arbitrary percentages, which is a fairly new thing. So every time you roll out or increase your rollout, you can just say, okay, I want to go to 20, 25, 30, 35, and you can do that. You can change that ad hoc anytime you want. You've got the option of halting a staged rollout, and that prevents any further updates of people downloading or upgrading to your app. But something to be aware of: if you do halt a rollout and then you want to fix that with a new build, you can't start off at a lower percentage with a new build than the one you're currently on. So you either have to whack your current build up to 100, or you have to resume your rollout with a new build at the same percentage. And not many people know that. I didn't know that 6-8 months ago. So something to bear in mind if you're halting a stage rollout. Also, they have made quite a few improvements to the Google Play console recently, so you get a better visibility of how far your rollout has actually gone. So you set a percentage of people have app updates enabled over Wi-Fi only, and you see these red spikes every night basically when people are at home on their Wi-Fi, and you see troughs in the daytime. Similarly, for new installs, you see them when your app is busiest, because that's when people think, okay, I'm going to download your app and I'm going to order takeaway. But remember, these metrics are measured across your whole user base. They're not necessarily the same as your day-to-day users of the app, so you probably want to look at other analytics platforms to understand what your actual adoption is on a day-to-day basis. So to track adoption by active users, you probably want to prefer other analytics tools like Google Analytics or Firebase or Fabric. This is a screenshot from Fabric, and this shows, you can see it just in the dimness there. When we were at a 20% rollout, you can see the adoption gradually tending towards that level, and then as you increase your rollout, you'll see a spike again, and it will gradually tend towards that. And Crashlytics is great for getting a very up-to-date stats on what your crash-free sessions are and your crash-free users, so you can keep a very close eye on your rollout, more so than you can in Google Play. And we actually leverage this sort of stage rollout mechanism to do basically an A/B test in Australia. So we rolled out an app to 30%. We held it there for several weeks, so that we could compare whether the new app experience people were getting was a degradation compared to what they had in the old native app, or was it better? So that was a useful benchmark for how things would go further down through the project. But you can't really do that with iOS, which I'll come on to in a sec. So if you do keep a close eye on metrics during stage roll, there's 3 key takeaways to keep in mind. Mind out for new users getting your app update faster than returning users. So depending on what your level of rollout is, you can often see new users getting it faster than returning users. Also keep an eye on adoption by OS versions, so particularly if you've upgraded or increased your requirement for permissions recently, you might see that your app gets adopted more quickly by Android 6, 7 and 8 users, and those users tend to be ones that might spend more, or more likely to spend, so that can skew your conversion stats, because your users on older platforms might have to do a manual upgrade in order to get there. And something we've been seeing very recently is watch out for session bumps. So people get notified when apps get updated. Increasingly on Oreo, you sometimes see these little blue dots next to apps. not on the notification dot, but like on some platform and some manufacturers, you see an iOS-like blue dot next to it, and it encourages people to open the app. Maybe it's like an OCD thing; they try to clear it off. But you see that on Android as well as on iOS. So App Store phase releases. This is a fairly new thing. It's Apple's answers to Google Play stage rollouts. It's not as good. I mean, I'm an Android user. Our iOS team think it's useful to an extent, but it has its drawbacks. So phase rollout, it allows you to control the rollout of automatic updates to your user base, but it doesn't affect manual updates. So people can still go to the App Store and they can fetch it. They can download it, and if they're downloading it for the first time, if they're going to the App Store searching for your app, they will only see your latest version. So again, that can skew things when you're doing an iOS rollout. And because users can still manually update, they'll often see this in their App Store. So they think, okay, I've got automatic app updates on, but it says I've got apps available to upgrade. And generally, you'll see this for the last 7-day updates. You'll see some apps that are still in phase rollout that you haven't been delivered yet, but are available. And in those cases, sometimes your new installs of apps will, your new installs of apps will exclusively consist of your new version, but you'll also see people adopting the app faster than the rate that Apple say you're getting adopted. So, for example, if you've got a 5% rollout, you can actually see it getting adopted much faster than that. So it's a contrast to what you see with the stage rollout on Google Play. And of course, sometimes you get these nasty red dots appearing on your App Store, or blue dots appearing against apps, and that can encourage people to launch the app just to get rid of that dot. So it can end up boosting your sessions, but of course those people aren't necessarily going to go through and actually check out, so it can really skew your numbers. So bear that in mind when you're getting automatic updates. And I've gone a couple minutes overboard, but if we have any questions, I've got some stickers while Elliot's getting set up, and I can answer a few questions now.
Yeah, let's do questions while the next speaker's getting set up. Any questions?
About this, the iOS ripoff of dots, do you know the manufacturers that are doing this? Because I've never seen this.
OnePlus do it.
Oh, okay.
At least on Android 7.
So how much percentage of the users that probably...
It's probably quite insignificant. I mean, we see like 75% of users on Samsungs on Just Eat, but it's definitely these third-party OEMs are in the ascendancy. Like Samsung's kind of plateaued now, but yeah,